Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When architect Grayson Miller fled to the mountains to build his dream off-grid cabin, he expected peace, not war. But one power-hungry HOA president had other plans. What began with a flyer turned into drones, threats, and a showdown involving the governor himself. Welcome to the HOA from hell. I never intended to live off-grid, but after 20 years of designing luxury homes for other people, I figured I'd earned the right to build one for myself, on my terms. 2 years ago, I bought a parcel of land in the North Georgia mountains, right where the ridgeline kisses the edge of Chattahoochee National Forest. 50 acres of hardwoods, rocky outcrops, and silence. The perfect place to vanish from HOA newsletters, lawn complaints, and small talk about approved mailbox colors. The cabin I built isn't what most folks would picture when they hear that word. It's a sleek, modern structure. Steel frame, cedar siding, huge glass walls that open up to the trees, solar power, rain catchment system, deep well, satellite internet. It took blood, sweat, and most of my savings, but I designed every inch myself, and I drove in the last screw with my own hands. No contractors, no compromises. I'd finally finished the week prior. The road up was rough, but mine. Gravel and dirt, winding just outside a gated mountain community called Clear Pines Vista. Their entry sign looked like it cost more than my first car. Every lot down there had some cloned version of a rustic alpine lodge with identical stone mailboxes and American flags issued at closing. They had a HOA, of course, a big one. I knew it was there when I bought the land, but my property was legally separate, outside their gates, outside their jurisdiction, or so I thought. On a warm April morning, I was sitting on my porch with a cup of strong black coffee, watching the sun creep over the pines. A hawk circled above the ridge. The quiet was so absolute it rang in my ears. That's when I noticed movement down the slope, near the tree line. A figure. Someone was standing right at the edge of my property, angling a phone toward the cabin. A woman, blonde, middle-aged, wearing a neon puffer vest and yoga pants like she'd just power walked out of a Patagonia catalog. I watched her zoom in, snap a few pictures, and vanish back down the trail toward Clear Pines. Odd, but whatever. Probably just someone on a hike, I told myself. 3 days later, an envelope showed up wedged in my front gate. No stamp, no return address, just a typed letter on heavy letterhead that read, Clear Pines Vista Homeowners Association across the top. I scanned it while standing barefoot on the porch. Dear resident, it has come to the attention of the Clear Pines Vista Homeowners Association that a structure has been erected which may be in violation of community aesthetics and view preservation ordinances. Additionally, we are concerned about increased vehicular activity near the southern boundary. Please contact our board within 7 days to clarify your development's compliance status. Respectfully, Karen Beckworth, President CPVHOA. I actually laughed out loud. Resident, huh? That's rich. I tossed the letter on the kitchen counter and pulled up my deed. The legal description made it crystal clear. My land was platted independently in the 70s. No easements, no association ties. I had my permits, survey maps, and build approval from the county zoning board. Still, I figured I'd be neighborly, or at least try. I called the number at the bottom of the letter. A woman answered with sharp diction and zero warmth. Clear Pines Vista HOA. This is Karen Beckworth. Hi, Ms. Beckworth. This is Grayson Miller. I just received your letter regarding my property up above the southern ridge. There seems to be a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Mr. Miller, she interrupted. We are quite aware of the structure, and we've received several complaints. From who? That's confidential. I kept my voice calm. Right. Well, I don't live in Clear Pines Vista. My land is private, outside your jurisdiction. Karen didn't miss a beat. All properties within view of Clear Pines fall under the Community Visual Integrity Clause, which gives us the right to review any constructions that impact shared landscape aesthetics. I blinked. You made that up. It's a clause in our charter, Mr. Miller. I suggest you come to our next board meeting to explain your development and why it wasn't brought to review. I nearly choked. Ma'am, I'm not a member. I didn't sign your charter, and I'm not going to ask permission to build on my own land. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing. You may want to reconsider your tone, she said coldly. Some of our members have friends in county planning. If your site were found to violate any ordinances, it could create complications. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just a nosy neighbor. This was a petty tyrant with a clipboard and delusions of jurisdiction. I hung up without another word. That week, I installed a second security camera facing the forested trail that led toward Clear Pines. I updated my signage. Private property, no trespassing, surveillance active. I also had my lawyer draft a cease and desist letter just in case. A few days later, I found a flyer stuffed under a rock near the driveway. Say no to unauthorized development. Protect our views. Preserve our community standards. Contact CPVHOA to report violations. Printed on glossy stock. No direct mention of me, but the implication was clear. They wanted me gone. Or tamed. Like every tree they hadn't landscaped into submission, I poured myself a double bourbon that night and sat under the stars, wondering what the hell I'd stepped into. By the time the second flyer showed up, this one taped to a tree on my land, I knew Karen Beckworth wasn't going to just give up. I ripped it down and stuffed it in my pocket, jaw tight, resisting the urge to drive down to Clear Pines and hand-deliver it to her front door with a flaming bag of dog crap. Instead, I called my lawyer again, updated the cease and desist, and ordered 2 more trail cameras. I wasn't looking for a fight. I just wanted to be left alone. I'd done everything by the book. Permits, inspections, even soil reports for the well. But I was starting to get the sense that the book didn't matter much when your neighbor thought she was the law. The next week, things escalated. It started with a knock on my door at 7 in the morning. Not the polite kind either. This was knuckles on wood with purpose. I opened the door in my flannel pajama pants, toothbrush still hanging from the corner of my mouth. A tall man in a county-issued windbreaker stood there holding a clipboard. Mr. Miller, I'm here with the Building Inspection Division. We received a complaint about unpermitted structures and potential drainage violations. I stared at him. You're kidding. He looked sheepish. I know. We've already got your permits on file. But once there's a formal complaint logged, we have to follow up. I showed him the paperwork. He walked the perimeter, nodded, took a few photos, and left with an apologetic shrug. Looks like everything's in order. Sorry for the inconvenience. Inconvenience, my ass. Over the next 10 days, I got visits from the county's Environmental Quality Office, noise complaints, a soil conservation officer, erosion concerns, a zoning compliance agent, alleged boundary encroachment, and, bizarrely, a wildlife biologist. Someone claimed I was interfering with protected salamander habitat. Each time I cooperated. Each time they left empty-handed. But the message was loud and clear. Someone was pulling every string she could to wear me down. I installed more signage, double-checked every inch of my property lines, and reviewed the easement maps. My access road followed a strip of land maintained by the U.S. Forest Service. It wasn't private. I had the documentation, but Karen had already started telling her HOA members that I was using their private maintenance road without authorization. According to a neighbor I ran into at the feed store, she was claiming I cut through HOA-controlled land like a trespasser. That same afternoon, a silver SUV with Clear Pines plates slowed as it passed the end of my driveway. The driver leaned out and took photos with a DSLR, like she was documenting Bigfoot. When I waved, she sped off. That night, I received an email from a generic HOA address. Dear Mr. Miller, despite your refusal to cooperate with community oversight, we are compelled to inform you that continued unauthorized use of Clear Pines' visual and spatial resources will result in formal legal action. We suggest attending our next board meeting to discuss remediation options. Sincerely, Karen Beckworth, President, CPVHOA. I replied with a PDF of my deed, the Forest Service easement map, and a scanned copy of my lawyer's updated letter. 2 days later, I found my private road sign knocked over and tire tracks cutting across the gravel curve. No debris, just vandalism. Whoever it was knew what they were doing. I checked the new camera angle, caught a blurry image of someone in a hoodie getting back into that same silver SUV. I turned the footage over to the sheriff's office. They took a report, shrugged, said they'd keep an eye out. I wasn't optimistic. Then came the breaking point. A certified envelope delivered by courier labeled Final HOA Notice. Inside was a 6-page demand to cease development, submit property for HOA review, and halt all non-sanctioned activities. It included a fake map, with my parcel shaded in red, and a forged-looking provisional annexation form. I didn't laugh this time. I scanned every page, emailed my lawyer, and called the county recorder's office to make sure no fraudulent filings had been slipped into the registry. Thankfully, Nothing had been processed. Yet, Karen had shifted tactics. From harassment to administrative warfare. I poured myself a stiff drink, stared out over the treetops, and realized something. This wasn't going to stop. Not until she lost, or I broke. And I had no plans to break. I got the call on a Wednesday afternoon while I was elbow deep in rewiring the inverter panel. "Grayson?" came the familiar voice, gruffer than I remembered, but still unmistakable. "It's Nolan. Got a favor to ask." Nolan James, governor of Georgia, and before that, my CO in Afghanistan, and the closest thing I had to a brother. We'd bled together in places too ugly to name. Back then, he was just Lieutenant James, cracking grim jokes under mortar fire. Now he ran the whole damn state. "Anything," I said, wiping my hands. "You okay?" "Better than okay. Just need 2 days to disappear. No staff, no cameras, no donors, just quiet. I'm working on a speech for the Southern Eco Forum, and I can't think with lobbyists breathing down my neck." "You want the cabin?" "I want the cabin." I told him to pack his boots. He laughed. "Still can't believe you built that place yourself. Some of us didn't get cushy state budgets." He arrived Friday evening in a nondescript black Tahoe with tinted windows and a single bodyguard, some square-jawed guy in tactical slacks who scanned my driveway like it was Fallujah. Nolan stepped out in jeans and a Braves cap, grinning like a kid at summer camp. "Jesus," he muttered as he took in the cabin. "It's like a Bond villain hideout. In the best way. Wait till you see the composting toilet." We grilled steaks, drank bourbon, and sat under the stars like old times. Nolan told a few stories from the Capitol, some hilarious, some infuriating, and by midnight he was dead asleep in the guest loft. His security guy posted up on the couch, alert but relaxed. Saturday passed quietly. Nolan spent most of it on the deck, scribbling in a leather notebook. I tinkered with a waterline. We barely spoke. It was perfect. Then came Sunday morning. I was halfway through brewing coffee when I heard the first knock. Not just a knock, a pounding, like someone was trying to break the damn door in. Thud, thud, thud. I glanced at the time, 7:03 a.m. Nolan shuffled down the stairs in pajama pants and a faded Georgia Tech shirt, hair sticking up like a haystack. "What the hell is that?" The bodyguard was already moving, quiet, controlled. He cracked the front door open 6 inches, body angled, one hand on his hip. I heard her voice before I saw her. "I demand to know who is staying here. This vehicle was not registered with the HOA. You can't just invite people to this part of the mountain." Karen Beckworth. In full Karen uniform, fleece vest, khakis, clipboard, no makeup, just raw, entitled fury. "This is private property," the guard said evenly. "Step back from the door. I am the elected president of Clear Pines Vista." She snapped. "We have rules here. There are protocols." I stepped in behind the guard. "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" She glared at me, eyes wild. There was an unfamiliar vehicle seen at the edge of our boundary last night. Our community has a right to know who's coming and going. Your property may not be under HOA, but you are within visual and environmental impact radius. You're trespassing, I cut in. That's when Nolan stepped forward, barefoot, holding a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Golfer." "Ma'am," he said in a low, slow drawl, "you just kicked in the door of a private citizen in violation of multiple trespass statutes and interrupted a state official in the middle of a private retreat." Karen blinked. "And you are?" "Nolan James." Her face twisted. "And do you live here? Because if you do, you're subject to the same rules." "I am the governor of this state," he said flatly. "You are harassing a property owner, interrupting a government official, and very likely violating more laws than you understand." Karen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I didn't realize." "Step off this property now," Nolan said, his voice ice cold. "Next time you'll be speaking to the state attorney general." She sputtered, turned, and stomped off down the drive like a wet hen in hiking boots. Nolan turned to me and deadpanned, "You weren't kidding about the HOA. Welcome to my hell." The bodyguard pulled out his phone. "Got the whole thing on camera. Want me to send it to your lawyer?" "Hell yes," I said. Then I poured Nolan another cup of coffee, handed him a breakfast sandwich, and tried not to laugh as he muttered under his breath, "I came here to relax, Grayson." I didn't think Karen would have the gall to escalate after being verbally Body slammed by the governor of Georgia, but clearly I was underestimating the power of unfiltered audacity. The very next morning, around 10:30, I was halfway through cleaning out the fireplace when I saw a flash of blue and red lights flicker across the trees. A sheriff's cruiser crawled up my gravel drive like it was hunting something. Behind it came a second vehicle, county-issued SUV, with a familiar figure sitting in the passenger seat, her arms crossed tight, jaw locked. Karen Beckworth. I opened the door before the cruiser had even parked. The deputy stepped out, hand resting near his holster like he was expecting trouble. "Morning," I said calmly, wiping soot off my hands. "Can I help you, deputy?" He gave me a polite but cautious nod. "We received a 911 call reporting a potential armed intruder at this address. HOA president claims an unknown man with a bodyguard forcibly entered the home over the weekend." I blinked. "Are you serious?" The county official, code enforcement judging by the badge, joined him. "We've also received a secondary report alleging this structure was built without valid permits and may be in violation of setback requirements." Karen emerged from the SUV, chin high like a courtroom queen. "He's housing an unregistered guest, possibly a mercenary. That man threatened me and refused to show identification. I don't care who he says he is. This property is unsafe and probably illegal." At that exact moment, the governor's Tahoe pulled around the back of the cabin. Nolan stepped out wearing the same faded jeans, his state ID badge clipped to his belt, and said loud enough for every bird in the forest to hear, "Sheriff, good to see you again. Nolan James. I trust you got the recording my office sent this morning." Karen froze. The deputy's eyes widened slightly. Yes, sir. We did." Nolan crossed his arms. "So, unless George is now arresting governors for drinking coffee in a friend's living room, I'd say this harassment needs to stop." Karen made one last desperate attempt. "He built this place without review. There are slope violations. The runoff affects Clear Pines. He has armed personnel." The deputy cut her off. "Ma'am, we've reviewed Mr. Miller's permits. Everything checks out. The Department of Natural Resources already signed off on slope integrity. The driveway's on public land. There's no crime here." She turned beet red. "This is a danger to our community." "Lady," Nolan said, his voice flat now, "I am your community, and I don't take kindly to people using law enforcement as a stick to swing at their neighbors." Karen's eyes darted around, calculating whether to double down or retreat. She chose the classic Karen exit, dramatic sigh, muttered threats, and a stomp back to the SUV. The code enforcement official turned to me, embarrassed. "Sorry about all this, Mr. Miller. Just doing our due diligence." "Appreciate it," I said. "Next time, maybe don't roll up with flashing lights based on a paranoid HOA call." They drove off. Karen didn't wave. Nolan rubbed his forehead and muttered, "Remind me never to run for anything up here." Later that day, my lawyer emailed me a copy of the Ring camera footage. Karen shrieking at my front door, threatening to demolish my cabin, then getting put in her place by a sleepy governor in pajamas. I forwarded the clip to the county prosecutor's office, just for the record. I thought maybe after being humiliated in front of a sheriff's deputy, a code enforcement officer, and the governor of Georgia himself, Karen would do what any sensible person would, crawl back into her HOA throne and leave me the hell alone. But no, that woman didn't retreat. She regrouped. 2 days later, I got a call from a local reporter at the Blue Ridge Gazette. Friendly voice, slightly nasal. Said he was following up on a tip about illegal development near Clear Pines Vista and possible misuse of protected land. I asked him where the tip came from. He said, "A concerned community representative." I told him if he wanted a quote, he could print this: "Get off my damn property." An hour later, I found a drone hovering over my backyard. It wasn't some kid's toy. This was the high-end kind, with a long-range lens and flight stability, like it was gliding on rails. It hovered there silently, taking its sweet time panning across my roof, the solar panels, the water tanks. I grabbed a broom, swung like I was trying out for the Braves, and watched it veer off toward Clear Pines like a flying narc. That afternoon, my inbox was lit up with emails from unfamiliar addresses. Environmental watchdogs, zoning observers. One group even claimed they were performing a citizen's audit of rural developments. All were citing public concern over my cabin. Most were just anonymous Gmail accounts, but one had a full letterhead, with Karen Beckworth's name at the bottom as a community oversight advisor. I started laughing so hard I choked on my coffee. That night, Nolan called. You go viral yet? He asked dryly. Not yet, I said. But if I end up on the cover of Backwoods Anarchist Monthly, I expect a forward quote. I talked to the AG's office, he said. They're taking this seriously. That 911 call wasn't just a nuisance. It's a criminal misuse of emergency services, and your footage backs it up. Good, I said, because she's still escalating. You want me to send state troopers? No. I want her exposed, fully, publicly. Funny you mentioned that, Nolan said. You know that eco conference I'm keynoting next week? The one you were hiding here to write for? I'm going to open with a little story. 3 days later, Nolan James stood on a stage in Atlanta in front of cameras, donors, and a full room of government and environmental leaders, and told the entire tale. He didn't name names, but he didn't have to. He spoke of a private citizen, a veteran, harassed for building a legal, eco-friendly cabin in the mountains by a rogue HOA president who believed aesthetics were more important than law. By the time he got to the part where a pajama-clad governor had to answer the door to prevent a citizen from being arrested on false charges, the room was howling. Laughter, applause, outrage. By dinner, the story had made it to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. By breakfast, CNN had it. Someone on Reddit figured out where the cabin was based on a blurry background photo from Nolan's campaign Instagram. Within 24 hours, Karen Beckworth was trending on state Twitter. By the end of the week, dozens of former Clear Pines residents were posting their own horror stories, petty fines, forced HOA sales, weaponized complaints. One claimed Karen fined them for outdoor lighting being too cheerful. The final nail. A clip from my doorbell cam somehow leaked online, showing Karen shouting, "If you live near Clear Pines, you're under us. We maintain standards." Followed by Nolan's dry reply, "Ma'am, I am the standard." It went viral in hours. Memes exploded. Someone even printed shirts. I didn't laugh this time. I poured a drink, leaned back on my porch, and watched Karen's petty empire begin to collapse in real time. After the media storm broke, I figured we were in the home stretch. Karen had been publicly humiliated, outed as a tyrant with a clipboard and a god complex. Half the state was laughing at her. The other half was sharing HOA horror stories like they were war veterans swapping scars. But I should have known better. When petty people lose power, they don't surrender. They sabotage. It started small. Again, a county code inspector showed up unannounced, asking to re-review the runoff infrastructure. When I asked why, he awkwardly muttered something about new complaints from residents downstream. I showed him the stamped engineering reports. He left, embarrassed. Next came a fire marshal, saying he got an anonymous tip about improper wood storage near a potential combustion zone. That zone turned out to be my covered woodshed, built 12 feet from the house, with treated lumber stacked on cinder blocks. Perfectly legal. Again, he apologized. Then came the kicker, the IRS. I'm not kidding. I received a letter from the regional IRS office stating that a citizen watchdog had submitted allegations that I was operating an undeclared business from an unzoned structure. The letter asked me to provide documentation proving the cabin was for personal use only and not being rented or monetized. At that point, I started laughing so hard I scared the hawks off the ridge. My lawyer handled the IRS letter within 24 hours. It was baseless, of course. I kept meticulous records. The cabin was my primary residence, not an Airbnb, not a timeshare, not a bunker for hire. But Karen wasn't trying to win anymore. She was trying to wear me down through sheer bureaucratic attrition. What she didn't count on was that the storm she'd stirred up had a longer reach than she realized. One morning, I got a call from someone at the Georgia Office of Consumer Affairs. "Mr. Miller, my name is Daria Morgan. I'm heading up a special review task force the governor requested. We're beginning a state-level audit of HOA governance practices, and your situation was cited as a key trigger." I sat down slowly. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack. We're not just looking at Clear Pines Vista. We're opening the books on every HOA in the county, and a few beyond it." She asked for my documentation. I sent her everything: emails, flyers, drone photos, Karen's letters, the video of her screaming at the door like a maniac. 2 days later, I got a call from a guy named Reggie, former Clear Pines resident. Said he'd moved out 2 years earlier after Karen fined him daily for leaving a canoe visible behind his garage. "Figured you'd want to know," he said. "They're building a case. Real one." You're not the only one she's tormented. More calls followed. Two elderly homeowners Karen tried to evict for repeated violations of mailbox design. A widow who paid over $12,000 in mystery fines before selling in fear. Even a former board member who resigned after catching Karen falsifying vote tallies to keep herself in office. The picture that emerged was ugly and damning. Karen wasn't just a petty tyrant. She was running her HOA like a mob front. Inflated landscaping contracts, phantom maintenance work, enforced citations for violations that didn't exist. People had lost their homes because of her, and now, finally, they were fighting back. The state task force quietly opened a formal inquiry. Subpoenas were issued, financial records were requested, a team of forensic accountants got involved. Rumors started to swirl that Karen had hired her sister's construction company to do non-existent trail beautification for $30,000 and build the HOA. Suddenly, Karen disappeared from public view. No more SUV parked on the trailhead. No more flyers. No more fake letters. It was like the Queen had abandoned her crumbling castle, but it wasn't over. Not yet. I knew how these things worked. The claws came out hardest right before the fall. And I had a strong feeling Karen had one last stunt left in her. I was cutting lumber on the back porch when I heard the tires crunch. Not down at the trailhead where deliveries usually stopped, up my private drive, well past the posted signs that said no trespassing and private property monitored. I shut off the saw, pulled off my goggles, and stepped to the railing. There it was again, that same silver SUV I'd seen months ago. Same dark tinted windows, same HOA plate decal on the rear bumper. Only this time, it wasn't just Karen. 3 people got out. Karen, of course, in her signature fleece vest and clipboard clutched like a royal scepter. A man I didn't recognize, mid-50s, in a rumpled suit with a fake lawyer vibe. And a woman carrying what looked like a blueprint tube under her arm and a digital tablet in the other. I came down the stairs slowly, arms crossed. This is private property. You're trespassing. Karen smiled. Not her usual twitchy, rage-simmering grimace. This was smug, calm, practiced. We're here on behalf of the Clear Pines Vista Homeowners Association to conduct a survey inspection. You'll find the revised annexation map and enforcement paperwork in this packet, she said, handing me a thick envelope. I didn't take it. The guy in the suit cleared his throat. Mr. Miller, as per local coordination agreements between HOAs and the county zoning board, your property has been flagged for potential jurisdictional overlap. Our task today is simply observational. I barked a laugh. You're full of crap. There's no annexation. My land isn't zoned under your HOA. I have the deed, the county maps, and 3 attorneys who'd love to explain this to you in words you can't afford. Karen looked unfazed. Actually, the parcel designation was revised in a proposed amendment submitted last month. It's under review. That made me pause. She saw it. Of course, if you'd like to cooperate, we're willing to negotiate transitional compliance. Submit your cabin to Visual Standard Review, pay an initial integration fee, and we can avoid further escalation. I stepped forward, took out my phone, and started filming. Let me get this straight, I said to the camera. You're trying to claim my land, which has been zoned outside your HOA since the day I bought it, has been suddenly annexed by a proposed amendment that I was never notified about. Karen stepped back, but her smirk stayed put. I looked at the guy in the suit. You a real lawyer? He hesitated just long enough. I'm a retained consultant. Right. Consultant? That explains the shoes. I turned to the woman with the tablet. You taking pictures? She started to lower the tablet. We're documenting boundary encroachments. On to what? I asked. Federal forest land, because my driveway is on a Forest Service easement. You want to claim that too? They didn't answer. Then Nolan pulled up. He wasn't supposed to be there. He'd said he had back-to-back meetings in Atlanta. But there he was. Governor plates, a different SUV, and not smiling. He stepped out, walked up beside me, and looked straight at Karen. I'd love to see those maps, he said, calm as a cold front. Karen tried to hold her ground. This doesn't concern the state. It does when a citizen's property is being fraudulently reclassified. The woman with the tablet tried to explain, but Nolan cut her off. You've got 10 seconds to get off this land before I have the Georgia Bureau of Investigation look into this HOA for document forgery. The 3 of them went pale in unison. They left, fast. I turned to Nolan, stunned. How the hell did you know? He tapped his phone. One of the county record clerks flagged the amendment submission as suspicious, sent it to me directly. It was backdated. You were right, they're forging filings now. That night, I sent copies of the incident to the state attorney general's office. Nolan made a call to the GBI, and by morning, subpoenas were being prepared. Karen had finally stepped into actual criminal territory, and now the state was coming for her. They raided the HOA office at 6:42 a.m. sharp. I wasn't there to see it in person, but I got the play-by-play from Daria Morgan, my contact at the state's special task force. She called me just before 8, her voice calm but laced with something close to satisfaction. "Mr. Miller," she said, "thought you'd like to know we executed the warrant this morning. Georgia Bureau of Investigation, 2 assistant prosecutors, and a team of forensic analysts. We've secured all HOA records, computers, phones, and financial archives going back 7 years." I stood on my deck staring out at the tree line. They arrest her? Not yet. She wasn't on site. But we have agents headed to her home. About an hour later, I got the email, an official summons from the Georgia Attorney General's office. Attached were 3 counts of document fraud, 2 counts of conspiracy to falsify public filings, and 1 juicy charge of attempted unlawful annexation of private property, a legal rarity, but very real when backed by falsified maps, votes, and forged notifications. But the real bombshell dropped later that afternoon. Channel 9 aired the first report. HOA president under criminal investigation for fraud, harassment, and abuse of power. They played my doorbell cam footage again. The clip of Karen shouting through the door made another round online, but this time it wasn't just meme fodder. The anchors cut to a press conference outside the courthouse where Nolan, flanked by legal counsel and state investigators, laid it out clean. We have evidence that a private HOA, under the leadership of one individual, attempted to rewrite county boundaries to absorb a citizen's land without consent or legal standing, he said. This was not a zoning dispute. This was attempted land theft under the guise of bureaucracy. Karen was arrested that evening. They brought her out of her stone-walled mountain home in a state trooper's vehicle, arms folded, lips pressed into a tight white line. Her mugshot hit the internet 20 minutes later. She looked less like a neighborhood president and more like someone who got caught embezzling from the church bingo fund. I thought that was the end. Then the whistleblowers came. A former board member, a landscaping contractor, even the HOA's bookkeeper. Turns out Karen had been funneling funds through bogus vendor invoices for years. Fictitious maintenance jobs, decorative stone purchases, trail upgrades that never happened. Over 80 grand unaccounted for. And in parallel, she'd stacked board elections with fake proxies, disqualified dissenting members, and driven at least 5 families out through relentless fines and legal harassment. The DA widened the charges: embezzlement, election tampering, elder intimidation, and criminal trespass with threat of violence, thanks to the recording where she threatened to have the cabin bulldozed. And then, the part I never saw coming. Residents of Clear Pines Vista filed a class action civil suit against Karen and the HOA entity itself, claiming financial and psychological damages from her abuse of power. With the board vacated and its funds frozen, the HOA had no one left to defend it. By the end of the week, the county court filed a motion to appoint a receivership to oversee the dismantling of the HOA. It was official. Clear Pines Vista HOA was being shut down. My inbox flooded with messages. Some from neighbors, some from people I'd never met. A man from Kentucky sent me a virtual high five. A retired vet in Montana said my story gave him the courage to sue his own HOA for overreach. A lawyer in Macon offered pro bono work for any residents still cleaning up the damage. And Nolan? He showed up 2 days later with a bottle of scotch, 2 glasses, and a grin that said it all. "You lit the fuse, Grayson," he said. "We just made sure the fire reached the powder. We toasted on the porch, the mountain wind rolling down through the trees, quiet and clean. But I knew it wasn't over yet. One more chapter, one final reckoning. I didn't expect the courtroom to feel so quiet. Not with the press outside, not with the cameras rolling in the hallway, not with a crowd of Clear Pines residents packed into every bench. But when they brought Karen in, ankles chained, wrists cuffed, orange jumpsuit creased and pristine like she'd pressed it herself, the silence was complete. Not a cough, not a whisper, just the shuffle of state marshals and the sound of her shoes hitting the floor. She looked straight ahead, didn't glance at the crowd, didn't acknowledge the judge, didn't even look at me, though I was sitting just a few rows behind the prosecution table, arms folded, face still. I wasn't here for vengeance. I was here for confirmation. That all of it, the threats, the harassment, the drone, the false annexation, had led her to exactly where she belonged. The trial took 3 days. The prosecution brought the receipts, literally, forged signatures, backdated filings, HOA checks written to shell companies she controlled. They showed the video of her banging on my door at dawn. They played the audio from her meeting with the phony consultant, where she openly admitted to expanding visual control of our ridge through legal ambiguity. Her words, not ours. Former board members testified. One broke down on the stand describing how Karen used their disabled son's handicap ramp as an excuse to fine them weekly. A bookkeeper described being told to shred unused invoices and just add a zero if the contractor pushed back. Nolan testified last, calm, steady, no politics, just the facts. The man who opened the door and saw a tyrant screaming through it. Karen's defense team didn't have much. A few strained arguments about community aesthetics, volunteer governance, and good faith errors. It didn't work. The jury took 5 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came a week later. 7 years in state prison, $150,000 in restitution, permanent ban from holding any HOA, civic, or nonprofit administrative office in the state of Georgia, and a civil judgment from the Clear Pines residence that stripped her of her home, her accounts, and what little reputation she had left. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. Just stared ahead, like if she blinked, she might shatter. When it was over, I walked out through the back of the courthouse. The reporters tried to mob me, but Nolan had arranged for deputies to clear a side exit. I didn't want headlines. I wanted peace. Back at the cabin, the wind was cooler. Late autumn had crept in. The solar array hummed quietly, and the trees had turned that deep crimson that only comes for a week in Georgia before winter bullies it away. That evening, Nolan showed up again. No scotch this time, just a brass plaque and a quiet grin. Governor's office had this made, he said, handing it over. I read it aloud. Here lives a free man. No committee of SUV grandmas can change that. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped it. We mounted it on the beam just above the porch swing. The next morning, I got a call from a senator's office. They wanted me to speak at a hearing about HOA overreach. A few hours later, a man from the Department of Housing and Urban Development emailed asking if I'd consider joining a task force to review HOA reform proposals nationwide. I said I'd think about it. Then I stepped out onto the deck, coffee in hand, the sun breaking just over the ridge, and I said the words out loud for the first time in a long time. I'm home.